What an absolute pleasure having you join us today. This is Pat O'Mara. I'm the chairman and CEO of Inveniam Capital Partners. I'm here with Rick Bunker, our CTO, and Albert Berdellans, who helps us manage our AI solutions. And we're excited to be here with our new partners, Dante and John from LV8R Labs. And real quick, why don't we just kick it off with John? Give us 1 second on your background. Tell us where did you come from, and then we'll do the same for Dante, and then we'll talk about what is LV8R Labs.
Sure. So my background is mid-rise portfolio manager. My specialty was declarant transition, so the handover process between the developer and the asset owners, the stakeholders of the project. I recognized the problems in that handover process, and so I moved further down into construction management. I also recognize the problems all the way through design. And so I've pivoted into software in order to bring a full lifecycle asset architecture to construction management.
Fantastic. And there's been a ton of work done on this, around the world and we'll talk a little bit about that later in the podcast, but it's great to have you. And Dante, you have joined Jonathon as one of the founders of LV8R Labs, and Dante, give us 2 seconds on your background.
Yeah, the Dante Cervantes. My background is started from Deloitte, moving into manufacturing for audit and compliance reviews, financial statement reporting, and again, then ended up in blockchain development and in the construction industry.
Fantastic! What a pleasure to have you guys here. And just last week we signed a deal, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, we just signed a deal with LV8R Labs where we're partnering with you guys on a bunch of work. It really in the life cycle from design of a project all the way through construction, completion, and then that feedback loop and ensuring that that's there. And really talk to us a little bit about the problem that you're solving with LV8R Labs and how we're working together to deliver a solution that the industry needs.
Sure. BIM has a history in construction management globally, and so
and what is BIM? What is BIM?
Building information management or modeling is just a data architecture structure for construction management. When the software guys started building new architecture for construction, specifically for architects, we essentially revolutionized. There's been multiple revolutions of construction management. Its current iteration, in my opinion, are being driven out of a few markets, specifically here in the US and Europe. But Europe especially is very forward thinking or progressive from a regulatory standpoint on all of the moving pieces and requirements of construction management through procurement and supply chain management, which is a lot of different moving parts. And so there has been a push for a while now for better international standards because of all the disaggregation, intermediation between all of the parts and all of the moving pieces of what really is a chorus of activity in workflow that has to really happen for performance. And it doesn't really happen as well as many people think it should. There is a perverse incentive structure that's really, really hard to fix unless you redefine that incentive structure. So what we set out to do was take a full lifecycle architecture approach to digital assets of commercial real estate and really bring a potential compliance tools, compliance system, maybe a future standard.
And what a fantastic vision, because DeFi doesn't work, and you can't lend against a digital representation of the equity or the mezz or the senior lending if you don't understand the underlying state of the asset, right? Which is that's Inveniam's core, right? We got to understand that asset and it's not and it's not just the ability to anchor data, to provide proof of origin of data and proof of state of data and proof of process of data through these computational systems. Inveniam needs partners like you who are subject matter experts as it relates to what is the data, right? You know, what is the data and where does it live in what systems, and how do we process it in order to deliver it into a valuation tool like an Argus, right? Or so that a Cushman and Wakefield can value it, or to centrifuge so that they can lend against something, right? Or a Maple, or to you know, the future of these markets, which will be, you know, primary markets and secondary markets digitally, but likely will be derivative markets to begin on real estate on a global basis. And they need that information around it, right? And Rick, this is one of your pet peeves, right? That if you don't understand the asset, the instrument is meaningless.
Right. We can build the most efficient trading platform imaginable, the most transparent trading platform imaginable because of blockchain. But if you don't know what that token represents, nobody's going to want to buy it or sell it. No one wants to pick it a poke.
That's right. That's right. And this, you know, in some cases, the secondary trading of these instruments and the primary issuance and the derivatives and the collateralization are downstream benefits for many construction folks, right, John? You know, the first thing that they got to do is they've got to secure financing, then they've got to construct it, and during the construction, they've actually got to get the draws. Do you know what I mean? We have to process that. And Dante, I'll throw that to you, right? As a controller and somebody who's been in that function, the ability to prove performance in construction. You know, talk a little bit about what drew you to Jonathon and what drew you to blockchain, but not only that, this function where we're beginning all the way from design of project, where we're thinking through the entire life cycle, and for many people, it's just get it built and hand it off to somebody else, and then it's their problem, right? And then that person is reverse engineering to what is the data that I need, right? Dante, talk a little bit about this, and I know that I'm throwing a very broad, open question to you.
No, but yeah, no, Pat, I understand where you're coming from. Yes, overall is just applying the accounting principles on the project that have always been there. As what has been there physically, we're proving that in the data. We're creating the data real. You can rely on the data as far as where the project is, where it is against a budget, and how it is coming along in terms of cost. And by applying your accounting principles and controls, and maintaining that data for the client, and the client will be the holder of that data, then you're able to then apply the next accounting principles, or the next layer of confidence, which is valuation. So the interest here is to make sure that the data is consistent, reliable, and on time, and that's where LV8R Labs comes about, in terms of we're keeping tabs on the data from the customer themselves.
You know, and we talk about life cycle of that, right? That the better data informs valuation, which is gonna, with better valuation, you have better risk management models. You can lend money, you can borrow money more efficiently, pre-trade, post-trade, you can service that loan. And this really is getting to the heart of what a bunch of these DeFi protocols are looking for, right? And in many cases, they're starting from scratch, where they're saying, well, I've got a pool of capital and I want to lend. What do I need to look at, right? But Jonathon, as you know, there's a lot of this has been thought out, right, from a lending perspective, in the TradFi world, but also in the building management world. And talk to us a little bit about Europe as a leader and setting some of these standards, where we're building that feedback loop from design through construction to transition to the asset owner, and getting that. And what are those standards that exist right now that are the leading ones?
Sure. So I've been exposed to ISO 19650. It's a Building Smart international standard. There are a lot of fantastic products coming out of Europe that are really setting an expectation of what a user experience should be for a construction project manager who has fully implemented new architecture into a workflow. And so in a lot of ways, a lot of the heavy lifting has been done by others. But we recognize that there's an incentive problem. What caused me to dig deeper down the project management hole? It was a recognition of an incentive structure. So the common data environments that most construction management professionals are working out of, they're all trying to implement better tools for full lifecycle design. But you can only change incentive of a user experience so quickly. And so there are a number of methodologies built as a layer two to an ISO standard that are actually miles performance better than the standard. But we can all rally around the standard as an architecture and then deviate from that architecture with new methodologies. But this creates a validation system. So now we need market depth. We need projects to actually validate, allow our validators to show methodology at scale in an ecosystem across jurisdictions.
And I love that. I love that about the ecosystem around the standards, using that as a validator. How are we going to do that? And many people who are running construction projects are managing the draws and the delivery of that in a paper-based and or a workflow software that is by definition ephemeral, meaning it will go away. All the data will cease. It will be preserved in a banker's box, in case there's litigation and lawsuit.
Not even.
Say that again.
Not even all the time. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not even all the time. That's right. And I was the chairman of the board of an entity. We built a $50 million school, and the architect went bankrupt, and so there was a lawsuit, and so the charity who was the client got pulled into the whole thing. And I got to tell you, we were looking at pieces of paper, trying to figure out which piece of paper came first in order to determine, in the bankruptcy estate, who was owed what. And we were drawn into this thing. And you look at this and you just go, this is unfortunately a reality where the developer, as you said, have perverse incentives. Do you know what I mean? And he just wants to be done and he wants to be gone. And then during that handover, there's a clean slate of everything's good, right? So we don't have to see his mess ups. But the reality is the long-term owner of the asset would like to see the professionalism of the construction project, right? They would like to see, because that will be a precursor to maintenance of what needs to go down. And that deviation from what is a standard for reporting over time, once we have enough data, we're going to be able to put a dollar amount on each percentage of deviation. Do you know what I mean? That when you do this, this is a greater, and then we, with that data, we can create this. And I think, Albert, that really gets to AI. If we have data that looks through the life cycle of the asset from beginning, middle to end, the better the data set, we can begin to correlate those assets to other like assets and how they're trading. And that's the basis for borrowing and secondary markets.
Yeah, guys, I got to be honest. I don't really get it. So, Jonathan, I'm going to ask you something, and you tell me why I'm wrong, because I don't really understand much about the construction industry, even though I did spend 3 years working at a major real estate developer, which should tell you all you need to know about how that job went. So let me ask you something. When you go to a construction site like this, it doesn't really strike someone as a data-rich environment. It's not really digital. The only place where you even see a computer is when the construction managers go back in the little office in those trailers. I can see it in my head what those trailers look like with the windows and the bars on them. And the computer is older usually than the cars in the parking lot. So explain to me why that is the place to shake up with digital innovation. Why is that the place where a revolution is going to take place?
Sure. I think the revolution is taking place in a number of places. I think maybe a different project site would be like an Intel fabrication, right? Where they're doing semiconductor manufacturing. There's very high level BIM. There is BIM that's for rebuilding a large, heavily mechanically system building every 6 months based on a new production spec. There are guys who rebuild the same building every 6 months, and they do so in AR. They do so in environments where multiple systems have to reiterate very, very quickly all the time, and then there's clash detection. And so I have professional experience with professional licensed clash detectors, and they have been looking through Google Glass and stuff like that for years. Computer aided design has implemented a lot of really cool tools in construction management. You can do a scan of a property and get a geospatial report, and there are some job sites where a geospatial report daily is worth it. So the question becomes, what's the spend versus what are you getting back in return on BIM? And so if you start with a good architecture, you solve a lot of problems downstream, right? But at the end of the day, we all need feedback loop. We all could potentially automate more decisions if we had a better feedback loop, and all of the different derivatives of that information require a really good accounting or a tracking of all the data and the use of that data.
And you know, we this is, John, this is where we partnered, right, with Inveniam, where we're putting zero knowledge proofs on 13 different chains, right, using our system that you guys, LV8R Labs, in our partnership, you guys are building your tools on top of our tool. All of that infrastructure that we built, you have a white label version of, and you're now deploying, and you're building tools on top of it, bringing other tools in, and you're anchoring zero knowledge proofs into the payload of the block, so that when somebody wants to see, you know, and there's a calculation done in a DeFi protocol, and they want to understand the state of the asset, they want to see the value of the net asset value of the piece of the capital stack, so they need to understand the gross asset value, so they're going to want to see into the building itself, right? And we're going to need to see that real time. What you're doing is creating a mechanism for that feedback loop on a one-time basis, but also for the administration of that asset, right? Feeding everything from a risk book to a management to of the building to everything, right? I mean, your vision for this is the persistence of proof of state of data on chain that can feed oracles, is going to enable all sorts of knowledge-based tools, but the enterprise user of the benefit of blockchain isn't going to be doing it through a MetaMask wallet. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely not.
He's going to need to have his computerized maintenance and management solution, his Yardi system, interfacing with LV8R Labs, directly anchoring documents on, and that handoff from the construction to the transition to the long-term owner literally is going to be matching hashes, right? The data transition is matching hashes instead of transitioning bankers' boxes of documents, right? I mean, I think correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's the vision, right?
Yes. From experience, walking a beautiful brand new mid-rise building and reviewing, auditing its mechanical systems, and recognizing what the regulatory framework around construction defect is, and how in many ways operations end up bearing the brunt of underperformance of delivery. And those operators never even see it coming. Those operators are not construction managers, and yet contractually at handover, they are responsible for all of the liabilities of that asset. And so having been in that cockpit, having been put through those slaughters of projects, I personally recognize how the user experience changes for me with this tool. And so that was driving the vision and the architecture of this tool. Is I never want to be blindsided by a developer as an asset owner ever again.
Yeah, if I can, Jonathan, I just love what you said. And Pat, while it's true that the zero knowledge proofs anchored on blockchain and things are of intense interest to us and to Dante, you know, in a situation where there's a contentious audit of everything that happened, they're really boring and uninteresting to the people who are actually going to use this system, right? The secret of any software system is for it to create value somehow, right? It has to create value or else no one's going to use it at all. And then that value has to be shared somehow between the various counterparties that need to use it, that need to put information in. Because if it's just work that I don't get anything out of, you could force me to do it, but it's going to be minimal, right? So the real trick to a successful software platform is to find out how it benefits each party to the transaction. It makes it easier to keep track of all this documentation. It then makes it easier to get paid my drawdowns because I've reached milestones, because it was easy to keep the documentation, so it's easier for me to prove to the lender, right? It makes it easy to do the transition. So I can hand off this building at the end and get paid because there's money held back in escrow until the transition takes place. And it's easy to accept the building because I have all the stuff. It's then easy to operate the building. It's easy to insure the building. It's easy to leverage the building once I've got a bunch of equity in it and I want to buy my next building. Right? We have to look at all these things. And especially for someone with a decent sized portfolio, keeping all this documentation in shape is brutal. And that's why it doesn't happen. That's why when it comes time to sell the mid-rise 8 years later, when the yield curve drops off and, you know, it's the real estate portfolio manager says it's time to get rid of it, is a 6-month process that costs $500,000 of lawyers and accountants and everybody to audit everything. Making that easier makes everything better. Once it's trusted that that's easier, then borrowing against it, because accelerating in the default situation is easier, becomes cheaper, right? There's just this plethora of benefits that gets splashed all over everybody involved in the deal from having the documentation right and fresh all the time. And so I know it's not as sexy as zero knowledge proof stored on a blockchain, and I'm not making fun of you, Pat, because it's what I do, right?
You're right on the money, brother. You're right on the money.
Defining the workflows where we say, here's what it takes to build a building and document it. Here's what it takes to transition it. Here's what you have to update each month, each quarter, each year to keep it in shape, and pestering people to do it. Sending them an email. You owe me the rent roll. You owe me the new lease. You owe me the certificate of occupancy. You owe me the update on the maintenance of the elevators, whatever, right? And keeping that stuff right. Frankly, that's where the value that's perceived and felt by the users is going to come true. And we've proven that it can work for people managing giant portfolios who pull the production of their 10Ks in 3 months, which is a big deal. And yes, underneath all of that, you have to be able to prove it when it comes into a contentious situation. You have to be able to have the zero knowledge proofs and the transparency and immutability of the blockchain, making the whole fundamental thing trustworthy. But it's kind of not the selling point, right? It's car drives is really fun to drive. It's not that the transmission's the best. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
And I'm the
absolutely.
guy who makes transitions, and I'm saying that. But anyhow,
No, it's great. It's the car seller. You got the guy who builds it wants to talk about the, whatever it is, whether it's the battery or charging mechanism or the
yeah,
the fuel injection, right, or whatever it is. But the reality is the salesman is selling Zoom, right?
yeah, will it make my neighbor
And
jealous?
that's it. Yeah. And I think Ralph on LinkedIn came in and made a comment to validate, Rick, exactly what you're saying. And the whole point of this is we want to partner with Elevator and others like Elevator who are subject matter experts in verticals, who understand what the demands are. They understand what the user needs are, can build the right UI UX, can plug in the right systems on top of an infrastructure that we're using. And we want to partner with, so they want to use our infrastructure. We want to partner with them because they make the tools on our platform that everybody wants to use. And really, we want to be the Intel inside, and these guys are really the software that everybody's going to use. But this is, you're kicking off this business. You are raising capital into your seed round right now, Jonathon. Right? We're introducing you around to some people. You're pulling all this together, but you're also gathering an ecosystem in, because you have a lifetime of experience who've been working on these problems, and you've been talking about this for a year, right, with our team about building this. What does that ecosystem look like? Who are your partners in this? Who are they by type and by name, right? Meaning these are the kinds of people that are going to drive you to success.
Sure. Right off the bat, it's interesting that Ralph offered the comment. Ralph is an educator. I'd argue he's one of the leading educators in BIM globally. He gave me an education on BIM asset management. So the tail end of a larger BIM architecture, in that really it's only the delivery portion. But then it exposed me to the earlier stages of construction development. There are a number of communities globally of thought leaders in construction management who have methodologies that are using tools currently in production and developing new tools, right, constantly. And so you have within BIM an existing ecosystem. And I was given a very good example a few weeks back about not selling a hammer to carpenters, but rather selling a nail gun to engineers, because they're two different products. A carpenter may only want to use a hammer for the rest of their careers, but an engineer might value a nail gun, and how a nail gun as a product can potentially modify their process or business, and immediately realize the performance gains. Now, that being said, you still need projects. You still need workflows that are modified by feedback loops, which means you're talking about at-bats. Every project is an at-bat for a methodology. So we really need good data, and we need good methodology validation testing, right? And to do that, you have to get all of these thought leaders from all of these leading organizations together to share their private data in a system that makes sense commercially for us to develop on these methodologies, comparative models. And that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, and I think this gets to the pain point that is going to drive early adoption, right? I think the merit alone, you will have some early adopters because they're engineers and they're brilliant. You know what I mean? And they're going to say, I want that nail gun. You're also going to have some carpenters whose hammer has broken and they want to buy a hammer, and you say, I got a nail gun. And they go, oh, okay, I'll try it because I don't have a hammer. My hammer's broken. In real estate, the funding mechanism for real estate the handle of the hammer may not be broken, but there's big cracks in it. And in Q3 and Q4, that handle looks like it might break off. You know what I mean? And that's going to drive early adoption. I'm a carpenter. I don't have a hammer. I need it. I'm a real estate developer. I don't have a bank who will lend me money. My loan is due. I need to refinance it. I don't have a mechanism to refinance it using my traditional channels. That is going to drive us into DeFi. You know what I mean? And these new models of funding. And what we want to do is make sure that these new models of funding deliver the nail gun and not the hammer. Do you know what I mean? Because the DeFi guys are just saying, hey, email me all the data and I'll 10-finger automate it into an Excel spreadsheet, and that's good enough for now. And you pull your hair out and you go, stop, we're not going backwards, 10 years or 20 years. But let's actually do this. How does this environment that we're in right now pose an opportunity for you for early adoption, where you're saying, hey, we're going to give you better user experience, we're going to gather this data, we're going to deliver this, and oh, by the way, we're going to open up venues for new financing, right? How much of this Q3, Q4 turmoil that we're all expecting is going to maybe drive adoption as carpenters' hammers break? Sorry for overemphasizing that analogy.
Sure. I think in the current macro environment, you have a lot of capital on the sidelines just waiting for the right opportunity. And in many cases, this could potentially be a redevelopment. But a redevelopment is a needle in a stack of needles, right? From a full project lifecycle operation standpoint, it's a needle in a stack of needles, because you have to make sure a lot of conditions or a lot of boxes have to check in order to justify the expense of a redevelopment that would make sense to save the liquidity of that asset. Essentially, that process has taken the REIT industry years to develop, right? But I see fuel on the fire here. I see an opportunity where we're going to go into hyperdrive on what we do with real estate data and how we find these needles in needle stacks. And there are going to be those who bring a hammer to a capital fight, right? Versus those who bring a nail gun to a capital fight. And the early adopters with the right resources and the right understanding of how to apply the right methodologies, right, man, that's where I see all of the sideline capital start gobbling up.
There will be, in the All In podcast, which I listen to from time to time, Chamath was talking about Google and the difficulties they were having and where they are, and how do they save Google. But he described it as, it is fundamentally the best business ever created in the history of the world, right? From a margins perspective on its core business, right? It is. And at 92% market share, right, they've got with their valuation, if they go to 91% market share, that stock is going to crash because they're going to see the slippage. And they own that market share, and they own the data, and that information that they have about their users and the ad selling that they have has enormous value, and it's thrown off huge cash flow. There's going to be a Google in real estate data, right? Because if you have a data, if the difference between a 4 cap and a 12 cap is the data, we can define the value of the data. You know what I mean? Like we just can, full stop, right? And if we can say, and maybe it's not a 4 cap, maybe it's a 6 cap and whatever, but if we can define the difference between a dollar amount, the collection, the maintenance, and the ownership of that data has real value, enormous value, right? Absolutely. And that not only unlocks value for the asset, but what it really does is it opens up the possibility of a derivatives market for real estate. And that's when the whole market explodes, right? The derivatives market for every product in the world where there's a robust derivatives market is a multiple of the underlying asset, right? The derivatives markets for equities, public equities. And the reason is you can own the asset. You don't need to disposition it in order to gain liquidity or to hedge it or to, do financial engineering, because the derivative markets allow you to do that financial engineering while still maintaining ownership of the underlying asset, which, by the way, in real estate makes a ton of sense. So why isn't there a global derivatives marketplace for real estate? It's because there is no data, right? So number one, that data, Ralph, as you put in the question in LinkedIn, Sean, if you can put that up on the about what Ralph is saying, if information has such importance to transactions, does it have value? A, there's value to the building. B, to the enterprise that becomes the Google and then uses it to lever into the first global derivatives marketplace. That is minimally a $10 billion business, like no questions asked. That is a globally important role that Inveniam and some of our partners are pushing into, that demand not only the collection of data, the verification of data, but the processing of data at scale, right? And that information exists out of the edge. But really, does this information have value? I would say unquestionably it has value, and it's measurable as we go. I want to turn it over. I think two or three of you were going to say something. Albert, did you want to? Rick, you were going to say something. Albert.
Let me jump in on that. So, going back to the concept that John had about the at-bats, what we're now seeing is AI allowing a lot of businesses to go from where they currently are, which may be far behind technologically or operationally, and combine in, a minute, thousands and thousands of at-bat type experiences. Because you go to a construction site, you wonder, how does this stay under control? It's because there are experienced, qualified, knowledgeable people there. And that is not, you can't whip up out of thin air a 30-year veteran construction manager. But on the data side, AI is enabling the ability to learn very quickly and implement very fast and jump people ahead several stages. So it's really an L8R Lab is a great example of kind of the ecosystem that Inveniam enables. Imagine all the businesses that could exist if you had a trustworthy, useful, on-demand data feed of data about a private market asset. Like, oh, is that all? Easier said than done. So
I would add on top of that, what could you do with a global network of the world's leading validators? Right? How important would that be for standards? Now, there are a number of people already doing this under current common data environments. I don't think they have the same underlying technology. And so I'm very interested to see what new standards could potentially be set with the methodologies that are already tracking performance above standard. But again, you'd need a real robust system to fully demonstrate that.
What do you mean by common data environment, right? You said they're doing this, but in a common data environment. Unwrap that a little bit.
Sure. Well, every construction project will probably see a number of different software platforms that they're going to go through from start to finish. What many experts in the space have tried to do is improve that experience and have reiterated from a data architecture standpoint over the last 15, 20 years or longer. There are in construction management what's called AECO or VDCO, Virtual Design, Construct, and Operate. This is where one entity drives all the way from design through operation, utilizing this new standard architecture, right? But that includes procurement and supply chain management, which again, for any system deployment is no easy battle, right? So the point here is you have to give the container 4 methodologies, right, to interact with a number of different parties through their existing common data environment, because we're not going to migrate out every piece of data. You can't.
One of the largest companies in the world, I was talking to their CTO and we last year, and we were talking about what they were doing, and they said just this last year we spent $100 million with a third-party consultant gathering all of our data from all of our projects and all of our systems and trying to put it in one data lake. And he said, and we've done it, and that's a strategic advantage. And all he was talking about was the sunk cost of that $100 million. You know what I mean? I now have something that nobody else has, and they're big enough that they could do it. What we were saying is you don't even need that, right? It's literally the guy who builds the first car needs to have a whole bunch of skills that are epic. But once you get into production, right? And that's what Inveniam allows, is the ability for us to take the data from here, the data from here, the data from here. And we're pulling data in a federated data environment, the data providing proof of synchronicity of data, proof of state of data, and then literally anchoring it into this mechanism by which multiple entities can use that data through the life cycle, through a tool like yours on our system. And that literally they can manage that building, and you don't need one giant database to rule them all. Do you know what I mean? No, the data can be in 7 different systems as the building moves through life cycles, or different components of them are. And then that data is now feeding bank draw systems to begin with, but then, Aladdin eFront solutions on the back end. Do you know what I mean? And a risk book at a bank, or a DeFi protocol, right? But the point is, how do you identify where the data is on a golden copy, pull it in, push it into compute, and then deliver it on demand where you still control it, and you say, I don't need to build one giant data lake in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Rick, you were going to make a comment.
Yeah, I'm going to jump back a little bit. First, I love Ralph's questions. We need to invite him to be part of one of these panels.
Yes.
The second is about the value of the information, and it builds upon what you just said, Pat. Is one thing about the Inveniam platform is we're not greedily gathering that all together in our database so we get all of that value. The value always remains in the possession of and owned by the participants in our world. So if in the future value is unlocked in various ways, direct or indirect, they get to participate in that. We're not stealing that. And I think that's key. And one of the most just sort of direct and obvious ways to understand the value of that information is to look at 2 examples I like. One is Carfax, a used car with a Carfax report versus the exact same car without the Carfax report. The one with the report sells faster and for more money.
And the commitment to maintain it opens it up so that it can be leased at the onset, right?
Absolutely.
Because then you have an automated repurchase value function.
And the other is jet aircraft. If they lose their logbook, their value can drop as much as 50%. And that's against a large denominator. 50%. So conceptually, taking the mid-rise building and putting it through the process of Elevator and Inveniam and having it fully documented, I think a strong argument can be made. We have to prove it in the marketplace, but that building's now worth more than it is without. Just like the Carfax car is worth more than the one without. Before you ever build a new parking lot or put a new coat of paint on or update the air conditioning, you make it worth more.
Yeah. We're coming up on the end. I want to throw some of these questions up. Anybody else who has any questions for us, let us know. But I want to go around. Matthew Schneider has what's the distribution plan for onboarding a large number of high quality assets globally while ensuring the data has integrity, right? Inveniam, we've been working on that over the last several years. We've got, $7 billion of assets on our platform today. And we're continuing to try and grow that. And we're also working with some of the very largest companies and the largest asset owners in the world to get, real scale. But one of the plans of how we do it is we got to have tools like elevators building. You know what I mean? We need to make it easier for the small to medium player to do this, right? The big players as well. We're not saying that elevators just for the small entities, but if you talk to a sovereign wealth fund, one of the top 10 sovereign wealth funds, and say we have a mechanism, we're talking to their chief data scientist. The reality is there is no chief data scientist for most real estate developers to small to mid-rise buildings, right? And if you ask to talk to that person, you may get in a fist fight, right? And the reality is, I think that the plan is we get LV8R Labs on, and we help them with multiple at bats early. Do you know what I mean? We get individual projects on, we get them going, and then continue to perfect it, and then see what we can do for using the value of the network and the value of the ecosystem, where DeFi itself will create viral opportunities that we hadn't even anticipated. Anybody else want to answer Matthew's question?
Yeah, I want to add, we would like to partner with a number of leading development partners. And those are organizations who have specialized under the AECO or VDCO model, right? These are the at-bats where I get a chance to hit a home run. And so obviously I want every at-bat I can take, but there are some at-bats that have a higher likelihood of a home run because how the service is structured of that project right from the get-go. And so that's really where we're starting, is a clear commercial philosophy in real estate development that recognizes an architecture and the gains of that architecture immediately.
Got it. Anybody else on this? I'm going to go around and I'm going to just say, give us your kind of last commentary for this. And then we need to give a shout out to Ralph for his great questions and an invitation. Ralph, we'd love to have you back on and join this podcast when we have LV8R Labs on with us again. And let's talk about the real estate construction industry and where that's coming. So Ralph, thank you so much. But Dante, any final commentary for us as you guys are launching, and we're so excited for you guys, but any last comments?
Not just thank you, Pat, for having us, and it's been a fantastic journey. Again, we're very excited to be able to create that compliance environment for our clients and be able to do it through Inveniam. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Albert?
Yeah, I think it's important to kind of highlight why any of this is a good idea in the first place, because there's short-term, medium, and long-term value creation. In the short term, getting this whole thing right, getting the BIM process right, is about efficiency and accuracy. That's the first kind of value gain. Then there's the medium term of all the things you can do once you have an efficient and accurate data process. Things like cost segregation and depreciating the different pieces and all these different things that you can do once you actually know what's going on with your building. And then there's the long-term benefits of tokenization, increased liquidity, being able to sell that data up to a marketplace, because I got to tell you, most of the entities today that are producing accurate and useful real estate data, they're getting strip mined by other large businesses, getting paid pennies on the dollar for that data. And then you have $1 billion business that's aggregating it all at the front, and it's tremendous margins.
Yeah, and they are aggregating the value to themselves, and people who actually have the value are giving it away for free and literally empowering and funding their competitors and the people who are going to put them out of business, right? It's a shame. It's an absolute shame. Rick, give me any last comments?
I think this is an exciting adventure. I think it's a market segment that's ripe for a solution like the one that we're putting together. And I like what you said, Pat, that we can see the value created and more equitably distributed among the various people who participate in its creation and its use. It's an exciting time.
It sure is. Hey, John, any final comments, and then I'm going to prompt you with one last question to give you the last word, but any kind of just broad comments you want to make that you feel like we didn't cover in this podcast?
No, I think we covered a lot. I think I would say that a validation system is no easy task, right? It requires a lot of moving pieces, and so we have bitten off quite a lot here. I've been asked, why would you want to pick a fight with Autodesk Cloud, right? And so my response to that is, if there is a potentially better incentive system that could reduce or at least change the perverse negative incentive currently running through those platforms, then I would love to be driving and developing that.
Yeah, and the reality is, whether we're talking about, Inveniam's largest clients and largest users, or our partners like Cushman and Wakefield, or fund administrators like Apex, or all the other valuation firms out there, and then the capital markets firms, both those that are deploying capital, the large pension funds, the large sovereign wealth funds, the large GPs. Their struggle with data on real assets is real. And real estate is going to go through an entire transformation. It really is. And the early adopters, are, as they come in and they partner with folks like you, their ability to hone their operations and execute and deliver the product that the market wants at scale, and achieve that ability to scale without needing intermediaries, is going to be where they're shopping, right? Who do I want as a lender? Who do I want as an investor? Who's going to add the most value? How do I have global visibility? How do I have global trust, right? I don't need to make somebody fly to Wichita to walk my building to like me as a builder. Do you know what I mean? But rather, the global community can trust this. And I want to go back. Sean, if you can put up, how do we get in touch with LV8R Labs? John, who do you want contacting LV8R Labs today, right? Who do you want as your partners that are going to just add nitrous to your system so that you can just move faster right now? Who are those people?
Yeah, there are thought leaders in the digital transition of commercial real estate. There's a digital transition that's been happening in BIM for some time. So in many ways, BIM is underwriting our efforts. So for anyone who has a methodology in BIM that they feel can be globally competitive, right? Globally competitive, above and beyond standard, and are already in the tools that are creating the current highest levels of performance. Let's see. Let's build the arena. Let's build the arena for some of the best project managers in the globe, and let's see what happens in that arena.
Fantastic. And we had a last question come on. What are the current methods of distributions for these types of assets? Right. These are Rialto. These are Oasis Pro Markets and Archax and ADDX and SDAX and InvestX and a dozen others that I'm missing, and I apologize, that they're building, and many people are building their own destinations where they can go and trade these things. Goldman Sachs with their digital asset platform, and there's a ton of these people who are building distributions, but the problem is they don't have inventory. And right now, the only way to scale that inventory, is to 10-finger automate it into an Excel spreadsheet that they upload and turn into some type of Oracle, which is no way to run a railroad, right? And this is what we're trying to do: build the systems so that we can have the life cycle of the asset be known to the capital markets and be operated well by the owners, right? I think that's the goal. You know, how do we make sure that the operations are known with transparency and trust on a global basis? Guys, any last comments before we go?
Thank you very much for having us, Pat. It's been an absolute pleasure. I'm excited for the opportunity.
We're going to do it again soon, and you're going to get Ralph to join us and maybe one or two others. But guys, reach out to LV8R Labs. Dante, John, we are so excited to get moving with you and be moving in the market at scale. God bless you guys. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much.